Hi everyone, Jane here again. Thank you for watching my video today. Welcome if you're new and welcome back if you're returning. Today I thought I'd do another tag in my little tag journal that I've sort of created, and I wanted to get my Distress Oxide ink pads out and have a go at creating a little rusty effect. So I'm starting off with the Speckled Egg Distress Oxide, and I sprinkled some water on there and spritzed some water on there to get it to oxidizing as well. I made sure that between every layer I had dried it thoroughly so that I could layer them up really nicely. And the next colour I used is the Fossilized Amber. And this time I'm sprinkling some sort of bits of water on it to try and get some little water drop effects and lifting it with the kitchen towel. The next colour is Rusty Hinge. This is a really good one. Obviously with the name Rusty Hinge you would expect it to be a really good rusty colour, but it really has a lovely orange hue to it. And I'm sort of just keeping to the edges because I feel that that's where the rustiness will mostly be, but bringing it in little places. Each time I was trying different ways of applying the water, so by just flicking, by clapping, by spritzing, to see if I could get different effects. It wasn't massively giving me sort of different textures on the tag, so I tried then spritzing some of the ink that was on the mat to see if that would help. And the final sort of rust colour is the Vintage Photo. So I've sort of gone for the three tones of the rust, so the yellow, then the orangey, and then the darker brown to give those different effects. And each time I'm applying less so that it's getting more to the edges of the tag, just like rust would form sort of in a real sort of piece of metal. And this time I decided to really squish that ink down onto the mat and see if I could lift some and get some different effects. And it made quite a nice effect. I wanted to add a little bit more of the sort of patina look back in, so I'm using Salvaged patina. It did cover up some of the other bits a little bit much, so in a way I wished I perhaps hadn't done this, but by that point it was a bit too late. Once it was all dry, I thought I'd do something a bit different, and this is another advantage of having this on a tag. I'm using an embossing folder. Now I do not have that many, and this is a Crafter's Companion one from many years ago. I don't know if it's even still available. I will list, as always, the products I've used in the description box, but some of them may no longer be available, although you might find them in little shops that may have stocked the products in the past. And to lift that texture that I've created, I'm using the Pebeo Gilding Wax, and I'm also using the Finnabair by Prima excuse me, Patina Green. That gives a really nice effect as well. And I just applying it with my finger. If you don't want to get it on your finger, because these are solvent based waxes, you do need to clean anything off with some like isopropyl alcohol. Then you could wear gloves, or you could use a little brush or a sponge or anything you like. You don't have to do it with your fingers. The Pebeo is a metallic wax. I can't remember the name, and the packaging has got so sort of dirty and worn that I can't even read the colour anymore. I think it may be something like Renaissance Gold. So I did buff it up with a piece of kitchen towel afterwards, and then I wanted to add some elements on, and I thought for a change, well, not for a change, I've always used my stamps, but I don't feel like I've used them for quite a long time as making elements for my project. So this is from an Aall and Create stamp set called Steampunk. Yes, Steampunk Alchemist. Again, it's quite an old stamp set. It's number 387, so it's one from a fair while back. So again, I'm not sure if it's one that's still available or not. So, you know, I'm sure that you could find others that are similar or have other things in your stash that you could add instead. So I'm going with this sort of the Alchemist himself, and a really vintage looking light bulb and a little vintage bottle. So I thought they would go nicely. I did want him to have a bit more structure to his suit. So I just drew that in with some of my Unipin, I think it was a 0.6 pen. And then I cut all the images out with my Tim Holtz snips, and I'm leaving a tiny border just around the edge. Not too much of a border, but just a little tiny bit, as I felt that would be a nice touch on this particular tag. Once I'd cut all of that out, I needed to colour in my images, and just for a change I thought I'd use my alcohol markers. Now I have two different sets of alcohol markers. These are the Illustrator ones from Spectrum Noir. I do also own one of the sets of the Yahoo markers. I can't remember which one I bought. I think it was the 120. It's the I can't remember the name. It's the ones with the chisel and the fine tip. I do prefer actually using the fine tip. These particular ones do have a brush nib on one end, and I did use it a little bit today, but I actually find it easier to use the bullet nibs than I do, and the chisel nibs rather than the brush tips. I just find the brushes a little bit too flexible and soft for how I like to colour in. Probably same reason why I like harder coloured pencils rather than the soft ones. So I'm just going over, and for the colours, I won't list them all in the description box. I'll just put the brand, because obviously you would choose the colours that you want for different projects. And I'm going with a sort of a light, a medium and a dark in the green for his jacket. And then I do similar with the skin tones and with his beard as well. Now, as I lay each colour, what I tend to do is I go back over with the lighter colour to blend it out. I know there's lots of different ways that people do their alcohol marker colouring. That's just the way I do it. So I always start with the lightest, then add the medium, go back over with the lightest, then add the dark, then go over with the medium, go over with the light, and so on. But I know that some people do go from dark to light. I have tried that in the past, and it works as well. But this is just the way that I've found always is the most easy way for me. Now, when it came to his hair, I only actually had two shades of the greys. So I just used the light and then the darker shade. I wasn't too worried. I think that with a smaller image, I don't think you need to worry so much, especially with some of these smaller areas. You're not really going to get a lot of blending going on with multiple shades of colour, but it's just nice to have, you know, a little bit of contrast and to get a little bit of that blending in. Now, once I had coloured him in, I decided I wouldn't make you watch me colour the other two images in as well. So we will just skip on to the next bit after I have done this one image, so you won't have to watch me do them all. I am just adding in a little bit of gel pen now, just to add some little highlights. I find that that just helps to lift the image a little bit. I don't worry too much about where the light's coming from and, you know, making sure it's all consistent. I just like to add little bits wherever I think it looks nice. Now, I did actually cut a little bit off the side of him so that he fit further over, and I added some foam pads to the backs of the Alchemist and the bulb, but I left the bottle because I wanted that to be flatter. Then in my stash I found these cog die cuts that I'd cut probably ages ago for another project. They were leftovers, so I got my Peacock feathers distress ink and just added a little bit of colour to these because I thought they just make some nice little embellishments sort of in the background of the tag and behind the images. So I wanted to have a little idea of how this was going to go together, but I did also want to add a little bit more texture and interest in the background. So I did one of my favourite things, which is to take some black thread, make a circle and add that into the background. I just think it's a really nice way of adding a bit of a different texture to your project, but also it just focuses in your images sometimes as well, and it breaks up that sort of background from the foreground, because sometimes, especially when you've got colours that are very similar, it can all start to blend. So as well as using the foam pads, I am adding a little bit of Pinflair Glue Gel on as well to the backs, just to give a little bit more manoeuvrability and also really firm stick. And with having the foam pads on, it actually lifted things up enough that I could still sort of slot other pieces in behind. Now, I also wanted to add a sentiment on in a moment, and I decided to go with the Tim Holtz Small Talk, but in the Snarky sayings, I think it is. I can't remember exactly. And I did pick one out to start with, but I realised that even cutting off the ends, it was going to be too long for my tag, and I really didn't want that. So I spent a bit of time choosing one that would fit. And then I glued that on as well with my glue gel. So I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, it would be fantastic if you could do that as well. And hopefully you will be along in the next video. Bye bye.